Hey, everybody. I hope you are well. Welcome to Chapter 20. So Chapter 20 is unemployment, and it's actually a really appropriate topic considering we are seeing a lot of it right now given the current economic condition. Unfortunately, the latest data hasn't come back in yet, so we haven't really seen an increase in the employment rate that we know that's there. So this is really kind of interesting because it shows how the unemployment rate is an accurate indicator of our economy, but it's a little bit delayed. We call that a lagging indicator. And so let's get started and talk a little bit about unemployment. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, hopefully you can see that. And what the things to remember about unemployment is that it's another really excellent measurement of the economy in general. The other measurement of the economy that we had talked about previously was the GDP, or gross domestic product. So you probably remember this guy right here, right? GDP. It's the market value of all final goods and services in a specific period of time inside our country. And so in the expenditure method, we use Y to denote the GDP, or output, and we sum it up, meaning by saying, hey, it's the value of everything that people have bought for consumption, plus investment, plus government spending, plus net exports, which, don't forget, is exports minus imports. Okay. And also we talked about how we really are more interested in real GDP, which adjusts nominal GDP for inflation. And finally, we also introduced this concept of a business cycle. And the business cycle says, hey, our economy actually kind of proceeds like that. We have booms, we have busts. We're kind of coming up into one of these right now where we're underneath the long run trend. And then there's this long run trend that measures what it looks like over the long run. Okay, so the big questions in this chapter are, what are the major reasons for unemployment? And what can we learn from the employment data? So it's kind of what we're going to be looking at. Hopefully it is helpful to you, especially given this current time. So given that our current recession is hardly even started yet, let alone over, it might be a good idea to look at the last recession we had. This is with the 2008-2009 recession. It's really quite dear to my heart. This is right when I graduated from college. And so I saw that, oh man, everybody was unemployed. Unemployment was so high after the Great Recession. And so what caused some of the unemployment in the Great Recession? Well, there were certain industries like housing that were hit really, really hard. There was a housing bubble. There was a lot of extra construction. A lot of people were employed in construction. And then when the housing bubble popped, nobody was constructing new houses. And the housing industry took a hit. Everybody was unemployed. There's also adjustment lags. And what do I mean by adjustment lags? I mean that corrections by the federal government or the Federal Reserve Bank take time, and they're not instant. You see that our current federal government is trying to prod the economy by sending out stimulus checks. And so even though these come out and have come out fairly rapidly, it still takes some time for the money to trickle through the economy. All right, there's government policy. Unintended consequences can lengthen unemployment because if, for example, you give people money who are unemployed because you're trying to help them out, that sounds really nice, but suddenly it makes it be not so bad to be unemployed anymore, and more people become unemployed. Finally, how employment is measured is something else that can change the unemployment rate. If you're not looking for a job, you're not counted as unemployed. Okay, so if people get discouraged and stop looking, they no longer become unemployed technically, and the unemployment rate goes down. But really, the economy did not get any better. Okay, let's look at this historically over time. The unemployment rate in 1965 hovered here about 5%. It's gone up. There's a big peak here. There's a big peak here. These both corresponded with the oil embargoes. There was an oil shortage here. There's an oil shortage. There was an oil shortage here and here, actually. And then this was, we had a huge inflationary bubble, and it had to be popped. That's what caused this. Over here, we have a huge amount of unemployment because of the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. Let's look a little more recently. So here's the latest data that I have currently. So it goes up to February 2020. And you can see that it's actually been falling. So we were at about 4.1%. We're down here at 3.5% right now. So it's at 3.5% in February 2020. Let's be honest, though, the coronavirus changed. What do you guys think March and April numbers will look like? I guarantee you it's going to be up here somewhere, all right? 5%, if not higher. Okay, so you see that we've had falling unemployment rate for an amount of time. It's actually, as of this, right before the recession hit due to coronavirus, we were at the lowest unemployment rate we've had almost ever. Okay, so let's talk about the different types of unemployment because it's, I think, good to ask this question. Is it ever practical to have zero unemployment? If you remember the last time I asked the question, like, is it possible or practical to have zero of something? The answer is always no, right? So in general, unemployment is undesirable. We don't want unemployment. However, as the economy evolves, jobs are in fact created and destroyed. And so we want this creative destruction process going on. The only way to have zero unemployment at all is to force everybody to stay in the same jobs that they're currently in. And that's maybe not what's best for our economy. So we want to have a little bit of unemployment. Actually, it's useful as people are turning over jobs, but we don't want a bunch of unemployment. And so this brings us to our three types of unemployment that we have. There's one called structural, there's one called frictional, and there's one called cyclical. Some of these are unemployment that we might actually call, like for example, frictional, might actually call that kind of good. That's the job search kind of unemployment. All right, let's hit it first with structural. Okay, so structural unemployment is caused by changes in the industrial makeup of the economy. So as our economy is growing and evolving and becoming more advanced, better even we might say, the industries change, right? Joseph Schumpeter, he's an economist, he called this creative destruction, right? And the industry creation and destruction is often a sign of a growing economy, and that's a good thing. Think of newspapers. Hardly anybody works in the newspaper or prints newspapers or consumes newspapers anymore. That's actually a good thing. We've moved to an online digital sort of news dissemination. The people who worked in the newspaper lost their job. It's bad for them. It's a bummer. But overall, for the society as a whole, it's been a beneficial move to go to online or digital means. Another example of the switch from physical to digital. So Borders was a bookstore. I grew up hearing about this bookstore. In 2011, it went bankrupt, right? Significant job losses in the book sale industry. Why? Well, everybody buys from Amazon or reads their books online or looks at Kindles or on their phone or tablet or something like that, right? So this was an example of a bunch of people went unemployed when Borders went bankrupt. However, we can kind of think that this is sort of actually like beneficial to society because we're moving. It's kind of like a growing pain as our economy moves. And so our economy has changed quite a bit over time. First, we were predominantly an agricultural economy where we worked in the fields. Then we became sort of a manufacturing economy. And right, you can kind of think about the big steel mills and coal production and railroads and making a lot of things. Now, what do? Mostly we work in offices. We're service industry, or we work online. I currently am working online. Right, so we went from agricultural to the office. I mean, working in offices, right? So today, United States is in fact a service economy, where we mostly trade services and not necessarily goods as much anymore is what we produce. Okay, so look at this graph. It kind of shows you the changing evolution of jobs in the United States. You see back in here in the 1800s, man, we were like almost all agriculture, okay? And then agriculture started losing a share, industry started picking up a share, and services now make up the largest part of the job. So you can see that almost everybody, what is that? Oh, probably close to 80% of people work in the service industry. Less than 5% work in agriculture right now, right? Isn't that pretty amazing? So that's kind of how we've evolved. So this structural employment, I'm going to say it's kind of a good thing. Why? It's undesirable to save obsolete or inefficient jobs. These jobs that are inefficient or obsolete, we don't actually want to keep them anymore. We want to get rid of those jobs and try to somehow help the structurally unemployed people into better, more efficient jobs. So workers must retrain, re-educate, relocate, or change expectations about work and pay, right? Maybe we use the Google job search button. The government can definitely help with training programs or relocation subsidies, but we don't want to eliminate this kind of unemployment because it is actually creative destruction. Our economy is actually getting better, more advanced, more efficient as we're transitioning into this form of these new jobs and thus creating unemployment. Okay, there was a group of people, maybe you've heard of them, called the Luddites. If you want to insult someone, you can call them a Luddite. Don't be such a Luddite. Who were the Luddites? They were 19th century English textile workers. And so they wove fabrics and they created clothing. Well, all of a sudden, with the advent of the steam engine, came this thing called an automated loom that did the weaving and the creating of the garments for them. And so all of a sudden, the Luddites, they were led by someone named Ludd. That's why Ned Ludd was his name. And so he was kind of their leader, and they trying to protect themselves from structural unemployment. They destroyed the automated looms, right? They'd go in, they're like, this loom, this automated machine is going to take my job. I'm going to be unemployed. I'm going to destroy this loom, and then I'll keep my job, right? And so here's something kind of to think about. As a socially benevolent dictator puts your hat on, right? Do we actually want that kind of job preserved? Not really, actually, right? What are the trade-offs of technological progress and structural unemployment, right? We have benefits of technological progress for sure, but then we have the negative of structural unemployment. So something to think about as a socially benevolent dictator: how can we preserve those jobs or protect those people who are structurally unemployed, but we want the structural unemployment in general, if that makes sense. Okay, here's another kind of unemployment we're going to talk about that's not actually quite so bad: frictional unemployment. So frictional unemployment is caused by time delays in matching available jobs and workers. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, think about this. You might not always want to accept the first job offer that you get. My very first job, I accepted the first job offer I got. Every subsequent job after that, I've taken my time and I've looked at my competing offers, okay? And why? It's because I wanted to make sure I had the job that was going to fit my needs the best, right? Firms, on the other hand, also, they don't always hire the first applicant. So there's a time when maybe I'm still looking for a job. I'm reviewing my job offers, that I'm unemployed during that time. It's frictional unemployment. Think of the kind of like friction from your hands rubbing together. I'm friction as I'm looking for a job, okay? Recent college graduates that are looking for a job, they're unemployed, and we actually want them to take their time to find the job for which they went to school for, not just jump in the first job at McDonald's, for example. That would not be efficient for our society. But there is a little bit of time which there is unemployment. How about the spouse of a person who moves for a new job, right? Often these trailing spouses, they don't have a job in the new town, and it takes them a while to find a new job. That kind of unemployment also is not necessarily a bad thing, because we want the spouse to take time to find the job for which they are trained, okay? And so frictional employment, structural unemployment, not really so bad types of unemployment, okay? The length of frictional unemployment. Well, you think about it, the internet has decreased time and cost of job searching, right? It's much easier to find jobs now than once was. All right, so the internet has made frictional employment actually come down a little bit because it's easier to find a job. On the flip side, though, government regulations that make it difficult to hire or fire someone, if you think about this, this makes frictional unemployment go up. So the government regulations are meant actually to protect workers. But if you're a firm and you know that if you hire someone, they're really hard to get rid of, you might not hire as many people, and you might take a longer time before you actually make a decision about hiring. You see, because you get stuck with a hired employee. So the government regulations that are meant to help the workers actually can increase unemployment, frictional unemployment, because the firms are kind of scared about hiring people. Right. And then, of course, there's unemployment insurance, which is a government provided insurance to replace the pay that you get when you are unemployed, the pay that you would have gotten if you would have remained employed. Okay. And so, unemployment insurance, I think, is a really good idea. If I lost my job, I would need to have some sort of income in the short run to be able to protect my family and provide for them, right? So it provides income to workers. It gives people time to find a new job. That's really important, right? If I get unemployed, you actually don't want me jumping at the first job at McDonald's that I can get my hands on. That would probably not be most beneficial to society. There's probably another job that I can be more productive in and contribute more to society for. Okay. It also prevents economic problems from spilling over to other industries, right? If a bunch of people in housing construction get laid off, then they stop buying stuff because they have no income. It's going to hit other companies and businesses. But if we give them some income to help them out when they're unemployed, they're going to keep spending that money, and it's going to keep the shockwave from hitting other businesses. However, a negative is that it reduces incentives to find other jobs quickly, right? It's you're like, it's kind of nice. I'm getting paid for nothing. Why try to find another job? I'm going to go a little bit more slowly, right? So there's pluses and minuses. Hiring and firing regulations and government policies like unemployment insurance can definitely increase unemployment, though. Let me show you an example. So here is Spain's unemployment rate, and here's the United States unemployment rate over the same period of time, 1995 to 2015. It's 20 years. You notice at every point in time, Spain is much higher, sometimes creeping up almost as high as 26, 27%, right? We know that in this period of time, 2014, the economy was not having any issues at all, right? But look, the United States, we had a huge peak in our unemployment from the 2008-2009 recession, and it started coming down. It kept going up in Spain for a while. Why is that? Well, they actually put in a bunch of regulations designed to try to help workers. They made these, they saw people getting laid off, and they saw unemployment occurring, and they thought, hey, the best way to fix that is to make it hard to fire people, so firms will have to keep their individuals hired. Well, what ended up happening? Yeah, those people who still had their jobs were able to keep their jobs, but then firms stopped hiring. They're like, there's no way I can hire another worker because it's too difficult to get rid of workers if I want to. So firms stopped hiring, and the unemployment rate, look at this, it just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And so this is correlation, not necessarily a causation, but economists who have studied this are very convinced that the increase in government regulation, which was meant to protect workers, actually backfired and made it more difficult to find a job because firms were kind of, scared. It makes sense. All right. And so that's where we're going to stop for this video. Unemployment is a fascinating thing to study. We'll get into the second half of this chapter where we figure out exactly how to measure it and the numbers. I have some data, the most up-to-date data from February 2020 that is going to show us about our unemployment rate currently in this country. But I hope you are well. Take care.